Okay, so hello Dan, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you from all of NHSN. I'm Sammy, I'm a trustee for NHSN and a PhD student at Durham University working on a citizen science project. Would you like to just introduce yourself, just your name, who you are?
Okay, thanks Sammy, nice to meet you. I'm Dan Turner, so a keen ornithologist, I suppose, so birdwatcher, ornithologist, since I was a young lad anyway, and I've always lived in the northeast and born in Tynemouth, brought up there, and now I live in North Shields. I didn't get very far away, I couldn't escape. So yes, and I developed an interest when I was quite young in birds particularly, but also other natural history as well. Yes.
Excellent. And how did you first get into natural history? Was it kind of at school level when you were quite young or a little bit further along?
Well, when I was quite young, I was in the Cubs and the Scouts, of course, but you did barges and things there, but I can't recall if there was a natural history one, but with me being at the coast, of course, at Tynemouth, the coast there was so accessible and so close for me. I used to go down, you see, onto the rocks round the headland there, around the castle and that, and I just sort of noticed birds and that around and got an interest in it. But when I was a young teenager, maybe 13 or so, my parents bought a caravan, a static caravan at Lowgate at Hexham on a static site. And we used to go there a lot at holidays and weekends and as a family, because I've got two brothers and a sister. And so quite young there, and the woodland nearby, you could go down, long walk down to a little burn and that. You could walk into Hexham quite easily, and the Tyne was quite close by, and fields and all this sort of thing round about. So there was great for me, because I developed quite a bit of an interest there. I'd get up sort of 6 o'clock in the morning when the light was starting to show through the curtains. You see, now woke me up, and I sort of got up, put my wellies on and went out, walking through the field and that, and noticed all sorts of things. So some of the early bird watching things started up at Lowgate, up by Hexham there. You know, woodland birds, gold crest and wood warblers and goodness knows what, and nests of oyster catcher, whatever up there and stuff. So we'll go also as a family, young family, would go before that holidays in farms, farm cottages around Yorkshire and Northumberland and into the borders and that. And there would go for walks as a family, My mother would sort of say, oh, I wonder what that is, looking at the plants, the flowers, you see. So I sort of got an interest in flowers. I sort of try and identify them. And I got 1 or 2 books. And so she'd say, what on earth is it, So I'd go and have a look and try and look it up and find out what they were and tell her, you see. So I developed an interest in botany and through that as well. And, we used to go picking blackberries and in the hedges. My mother would make wonderful blackberry jam, bramble and apple crumble and all this sort of thing. My dad had an allotment, so we had rhubarb crumble coming out of our ears. That was my favourite. And gooseberries as well. So that was great. So, we'd pick things and get jars and jars of it for my mother to sort out and make jam and stuff with. And that was all nice. And so as a young lad as well, I started doing a bit of angling as well, because we'd go to Morpeth on the Wands Beck, and I sort of noticed things, and I sort of got myself a little fishing rod, a 6-foot fishing rod, and got the various things, weights, and I'm going on holidays as well, go for a week at a time to Yorkshire or somewhere, or the River Teviot, and so I got the weights and hooks and floats and all this sort of thing. I went to classes on how to tie flies, for catching trout and stuff. Wow. I did a little bit of fly fishing. I was never very successful at it on the Tyne and on the Wansbeck and different places and holidays and that, and a little bit of sea angling as well. So I will develop a bit of an interest, in fish. What was going? So you notice other things as well, of course, when you're out and about.
Yeah. Oh, amazing! Yeah, certainly sounds like you got you went to loads of different places in the northeast and kind of got inspired by different things at each place.
Yes, and a lot of time spent, as I say, on the shore at Tynemouth, on the rocks there, and I got to started observing the fulmars nesting at Tynemouth on the cliffs up there. And I'd hide away under the rocks. There was a big slab I could get underneath it, and I would look up with me, watching the fulmars, the behaviour and that, and the rock pivots nesting there and stuff. And I started recording how many chicks the fulmars were raising, how many pairs there were on the cliffs of Tynemouth. And so ever since I was 17, I've recorded every year since then how many chicks and nests at Tynemouth on the cliffs for the fulmars. So nearly 50 years of that now. Well, 47, I think it is. Yeah, something anyway.
Not quite 50 yet.
But and so that sort of prompted me later on to go and observe fulmars nesting at other places as well in northeastern, like at Marsden, where there's a bigger colony, and South Tyneside, and lots of kittiwakes there, of course, as well. But also I record fulmars nesting at Old Hartley and New Biggin and on Holy Island in recent years as well, and Dunstanburgh on the cliffs there. And so I'll keep an eye on how well they're doing. And just to so that we'll have some sort of background information, I suppose, just to see, how the population's faring. And I had an early interest in fulmars with me observing the ones at Tynemouth, which is so accessible, so close for me to home. I thought they were great, the fulmars, how they sort of sit there and cackle to each other and sort of very tenderly preen each other around the nape and the neck and that, the pair of them, very tender they were towards each other, and they were lovely to watch. And I used to go sort of climbing up on the cliffs as well. I wanted to go and see the eggs, you see. So and I had a paper round. So I'd do it early in the morning, and then after I finished my paper round, I'd go and climb on the cliffs when there's nobody about. And I could get up to the top of the cliffs, and I'd look down from the top there into one or two of the nests, and I could climb up to one or two just to go and see, because I wanted to see these massive eggs I had. And it was, I took one or two photos of them. I've got all black and white photos. I took one or two, but I just wanted to observe them really and watch them, you see. But so I found the book, The Fulmar by James Fisher in 1952. That came out. That was a wonderful book. I've got a copy, and I sort of borrowed that from North Shields Library years ago. It was the old hardback card bound with a green cover it had. I borrowed from the library, the old library in Howard Street there, the Fulmar. Some wonderful photographs in there, lots of great information. I thought that was a fantastic book. And sort of learn a bit more about them. I always wanted to go and see the fulmars in northern Scotland, where of course there was these massive colonies there, compared to just like at that time, early 1970s, half a dozen chicks at Tynemouth. I wanted to see thousands of them.
Yeah. And I guess as you've been studying them for so long, I mean, almost 50 years, you do get to know the birds like very well, and I guess that increases your fascination with them year on year.
Yes, and it's so nice to go to these sites as well. Just if there's a few people around, and you can just sort of sit and observe and watch them. How wonderful flyers they are as well, gliding. They glide so well, but the circle, of course, trying to land at the nest, they may not get onto the nest site first go. They might have to circle around and try a second or a third time, and sometimes they miss and land a few feet too high and have to come off and go around again. But flying out at sea as well, how clever they are. They cover big distances going on foraging trips during the breeding season, way out into the sort of ones from Orkney out into the Atlantic Ocean and that to feed before, for several days before they come back to feed the chicks and so on, or to swap over with if they're incubating an egg. So clever, to find their way all that way and find their way back again.
Yeah, definitely. Incredible. So going back then to kind of your early years, was there anybody in particular that inspired you in those years? I mean, you've said about your family, obviously.
Yes. Well,
so do you want to say more about that?
Yes. Well, on television, of course, in the early 60s or the 60s or into the 70s. All sorts of interesting programs. So I'd watch Jacques Cousteau, great underwater world, fantastic, really interesting. One of my friends at school, you know, had a fascination. He became a marine biologist, and David Bellamy and botanical wise, David Attenborough, of course, and who else? Johnny Morris. Great. You know, I don't know if you know Johnny Morris. You're probably too young for that. But he was like a zookeeper, or at least he took the part of a zookeeper in the program. Black and white, it was filmed, and he would talk to the animals and in person, you know, as if he's having a conversation with them and all. It was really funny, really good. Nicely done.
With my dog a lot, especially in lockdown.
Well, it was a great way to get to build up a rapport with different species and that, you know?
Amazing.
And David Shepherd was like into wildlife in Africa and that, and he wrote a book about, what was it, the giants or something, because he's interested in steam trains as well. And he wonderful art he did, and these massive paintings of elephants and steam trains and stuff. Because I had an interest in photography as well. Quite early on, I wanted to record some of the birds, and I was watching, you see, and of course I borrowed my dad's old box brownie and got this little dot on the blooming picture. I thought, what on earth is it? Yeah. It was, anyway, I sort of progressed and got a 35mm camera. I was using black and white film at the then, and I started to learn how to develop me film and do prints as well in the darkroom. But yes, they're the sort of people who sort of sparked an interest off further as well, you know, sort of worldwide and so on as well, you know. You sort of get your eyes open to these things there.
Yeah, definitely. Amazing. And so you've spoken a lot about obviously spending time in various areas of the Northeast. Is there any particularly memorable nature moments that you have that you can remember in the Northeast?
Well, yes, quite a lot, because I've done quite a lot of sort of observing in our area, as it were, a lot of it at the coast.
Yeah.
But also, I should say as well, one or two other people before we carry on, because I thought, you know, living at Tynemouth, I sort of eventually found my way into Priors Park in Tynemouth, and found some netting that was up there, wondering, and so one or two birds dangling in this netting, wondering. I found this person wandering about. He says he's concerned about me looking at these nets. I says, are you catching the birds? I said. Anyway, I got to know who this chap was, Keith Jerez, who was the secretary of the local bird club in Northumberland and Tyneside, and I got to know Keith quite well and helped him over the years with his ringing. He was catching and ringing the sort of passerines and that in Priors Park, warblers, flycatchers, all sorts of birds passing through. Anyway, and I could say a bit more about it as well. But your question, what was your question again?
Do you have any memorable nature moments?
Yes, well, 1978, so I was quite into birds and getting into gulls, of course, in my late teens, early 20s. So it was great. 1978, I found a Ross's gull, St Mary's Island. It's quite a rare thing. It was the 23rd one for the UK. I was looking out to sea. It was December 1978. At 21, I was 21 years old. I just graduated that year, and I was looking out to sea with binoculars. Saw this bird way out there, starting heading towards me. I thought it was a little gull. Anyway, it turned out it kept coming towards me all the time, and eventually it flew over my head. I saw its tail, wedge-shaped tail. This is a Ross's gull. I said, I've been wanting to see a Ross's gull for years. You see, I'd missed the one that was in the mouth of the Tyne in 1970 or so, because I was only 13 at the time. And so Ross's gull. Anyway, it went over, and I thought it's going to land nearby. I thought it must be worn out. It's heading for land to rest. I thought it must have come a long way. It wants to rest. So I dashed about trying to find it. Eventually, I found it in a field nearby with some other gulls, black-headed gulls. And I told one or two people, and Ross's gull, anyway, it was around for about a week altogether. Loads of people saw it. and I don't think I even got a photograph of it. I was too busy watching it anyway. So that was a lovely bird to see. That was great. I found another rare bird, 1998, a Bonaparte's gull at Cresswell Pond, which was really nice. That was another North American bird. But it's always lovely. I'd spend a lot of time at North Shields Fish Quay, the mouth of the River Tyne, seeing the winter gulls there that come from the Arctic, the glaucus and the Iceland gulls. And it's always nice to see them in the winter time as they arrive and spend time with us before they go back north again. But yes, that sort of Ross's gull stands out a bit because I was quite young. And so I got my first job after leaving university at that point, and I was a nature trail planner for North Tyneside Council. That was based on my botanical training I'd done at Durham University, you see. They took me on as a botanist, you see. And I was there, it was a 4 months placement actually, and they kept me on. I was there for about a year because I was going to go on an expedition that autumn. I say if the expedition had gone ahead, I wouldn't have spotted this Ross's gull. I would have been away in Guyana and South America trying to identify tropical trees and things. Wow. Anyway, but because we were going to go and study the giant otter, you see, and make a film about it, but it fell through. Went ahead 2 years later, but I wasn't involved at that time. And a film was made for the television called The River Wolf about the giant otter. And they used some Guyanese students, I think, helping to identify the plant life and stuff as well. But that was Keith and Liz Laidler, two zoologists who organised the trip, the expedition, as it were. So I got this temporary job, you see, when I left university. So because I had to find £500 to pay my way to get to Guyana, you see. And so I got this temporary job. I thought by the end of it, I'll have £500 and I can get there, you see. Yeah. So, but of course, then the thing fell through. So never mind, I was still, so that they kept me on, you see, for this job. And so I planned a nature trail anyway, Killingworth Nature Trail, and a leaflet came out and did botanical surveys in North Tyneside and stuff, and that was nice.
Amazing. And then what did you kind of go on to do after that then? So that was at the council straight after uni, wasn't it? And then what after that?
Yeah. Well, because part of my degree course at Durham was in IT, in computing, I applied for IT jobs and got taken on by Northumbria Water. And I was taken on there in 1979, and I was there only for less than a year as a computer programmer trainee, a graduate computer services trainee. That was my title. Yes, and it was a permanent job, but I was daft because I left it. I had other ideas, you see, at the time, and it sort of knocked me back a bit. I ended up unemployed for 2.5 years or something like that. Then I got a temporary post at the Hancock Museum for 6 months, cataloguing the bird skin collection, putting it, computerizing the information and stuff, and identifying birds from the storage area. A lot of the birds, they didn't exactly know what they had, you see, in the stores at the time, sort of digging stuff out and trying to identify what we had. It was really interesting. And then Peter Davis was my boss there, Professor Peter Davis. He's still on the go, of course, and involved with the Natural History Society. And Tony Tynan was there as well, of course. And Eric Morton was a taxidermist at the time as well, and he was at the museum. And they took a few sort of temporary researchers, as it were. It was like CEP, Community Enterprise Program. I think that was it. So you got your dole money and an extra £10 or something like that. But it was like a wage, as it were. Anyway, so that was interesting. But then I got a job. I was with North Tyneside Council again. For 5.5 years, I was a driver labourer. I started as a womble, picking up litter on the bank sides of Tynemouth on the coast, and they kept me on again. And eventually they started to train me on different things, and I did a lot of the jobs that were going in the council for all the manual workers and drivers and that. I was called a spare man. So anybody who was on holiday, I would fill in and do the job for them. And I drove gritters and bin wagons and street sweepers and all this sort of thing. Anyway, then I was sort of still looking at the time, this is the 80s, to get a job in IT, you see, because, but it was really hard. It was the 1980s, the sort of recession and all. So I trained as a teacher, then went to Bradford, trained as a teacher, got a teaching job for a year. And then I did, in North Tyneside, I taught 6 and 7-year-old children, just general subjects. I'm giving you my life story here. You'll be getting fed up. And anyway, then I did a master's. Then I applied for a master's after doing my probationary year as a teacher. Did a master's software engineering, Newcastle Polytechnic, a year. And then I had a year sort of fiddling about in IT, and then got fixed up in IT jobs after that. I worked in computing, as it were, for 20 years or so altogether. I had 2 main jobs after that in IT, and then I left paid employment, as it were, 10 years ago, because I had other ideas, other things I wanted to do. I'd started writing a book, you see, and when I was working, I didn't really have time to do it as I wanted. So I sort of thought, well, I thought, well, I can just about manage. So I handed me notice in and left, and I'm still going anyway. I'm still managing. So,
so incredibly diverse career, and then obviously everything that you've done outside of your career and everything since then. So what was the book that you were writing?
Well, so it came out in 2014 in December. It took me 4 years. Fish Key Folk of North Shield, it's called. I've got a copy. I'll show you the cover if it'll. Anyway, there it is. It's probably back to front. Yeah. Fish Key Folk. The boat's called the Luke. Belongs to the Clark family, the fishing family, and so anyways, 13 chapters in my book. 13 people, each person got their own chapter. People I know, I've known for a long time, with me spending a long time at the Fish Quay and that over the years. Fishermen, lifeboatmen, customs and excise man, fish merchant, a lady who looked after sick and injured birds, this sort of thing. And so I talked to them. I'd already had photographs of quite a few of these people I'd taken over the years and things. And so I sort of got it all together and produced that. And so then the next 2 years, another couple of books popped out, and then another one, you see, all based around the River Tyne, the mouth of the River Tyne, and some birds involved. So sort of local history and natural history and social history sort of thing as well. And so I did one called Life on the Tyne, which is some of my photographs going back to 1974, and then bring it up to date as well, sort of. And a diary, like a journal as well, a journal for 2011. That was the year I left my job, and it was a diary for that year. I've kept the diary going since then, and I might publish another one. So that was Birds, Beaches and Boats, my diary anyway.
Oh, amazing. So I think we're coming up to time now, but just one last question. So given everything that you've learned across your lifetime, obviously we've spoken about all sorts of things, all amazing experiences that you've had, what tips would you pass on to someone who is just starting out in natural history?
Well, I think getting a good grounding in sort of the variety of natural history is a good way to start. You know, there's so many different aspects to it. You've got, you know, birds, mammals, insects, but you know, all sorts of plant life and geology and all this sort of thing. And when I went to university at Durham, I did some geology as well. That was a real eye-opener, all the different aspects to that as well. You know, so get a grounding, learn about different aspects, and also maybe about your local area as well. Try to learn a bit about your local area, I think, and later on I think it's a good thing to specialize a bit as well, to sort of you know, go down a particular route, and then you can concentrate and learn a bit more about one thing in particular. I think that's really good, and that's how we can sort of progress knowledge and things that way.
Certainly. Oh, amazing. Well, thank you ever so much. It's been really, really interesting to talk to you. Hopefully all of our listeners have enjoyed listening to that as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sammy, for asking me. It's been nice to chat. Thank you.
Yeah, no, likewise. So thank you very much, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.